Hello. The objective of this discussion is to introduce you to the important and exciting world of compliance standards for marine manufacturing. Now I know you may be thinking, what's the opposite of exciting is boring. But I hope to convince you that that's not the case. In fact, I wonder if it would make a difference to you if I said that following compliance standards in our product can literally be the difference between life and death for one of our customers. I imagine that it would make a difference to you. A few years ago, I was part of a shakedown crew, and we were on the Great Lakes with a 36-foot sedan bridge. Now, that's a good-sized boat. And about midway through the testing, a storm blew in. Dark clouds, thunder and lightning, driving rain and winds. It even began to hail. And as we made our way back to the marina, even in a boat that size, the water got very rough with 6-8-foot swells coming over the deck, and it was a very rough ride. It was a little intimidating, a scary ride, I have to say. But then I noticed as we were making our way back to the marina, off the port bow, a small boat, 18, 20-foot boat, and it would appear up on top of the waves and then disappear, and it would appear and disappear, and it was obviously not underway. But then I also noticed that as it popped up, there was a man standing in the bow, waving his arms, waving a towel, frantically trying to get our attention in the storm. And so we made our way over there, and as we pulled up alongside, we couldn't get too close, so we were not able to get them off the boat, because what we were afraid is that the storm would crash us together and cause us both to sink. But we were able to get him a line. But I noticed as we were throwing the line, that huddled in the back, in the aft seat of that boat, was his wife and 2 small children, and they were terrified, crying and visibly upset, as you can imagine, because it was a pretty bad storm. And so we were able to pull them back to the marina, and the next day, when we went back to secure our own boat, he was there looking at his, and we took a look at it with him. And what we found was that the wiring harness had passed through a bulkhead, as they do, and had not been chaff protected, which is part of compliance standards. And that harness, through the rough waters and use of that boat, had rubbed through the insulation on the wiring harness and caused it to short out. Now that's what caused system failure. But as we examined the boat, what we really found out is that not only had it shorted the system, but it actually caught fire. And the fire had run in both directions of that wiring harness, melting all the insulation, and what could have been a very serious fire aboard that vessel. So you can imagine what would be worse than being out in the storm with bad weather would be to have your boat catch on fire with you and your small family. And this is a Great Lake, so I'm talking about with no shore visible. And so you can imagine that scenario playing out, how bad that could have been. So the agenda for this discussion will be to examine the risk of noncompliance, review the 3 ruling agencies that we use for compliance, define best practice methodology, which is how we handle our compliance on our factory floor, review the 3 critical areas requiring certification, and then discuss next steps for the organization. Number 1, risk of noncompliance. So if you think about what I described in my scenario was a systems failure, that's probably the worst thing that can happen. And then you got to think about the contributing factors or the impacts of that. And number 1, and these are not in order of importance, number 1, high warranty costs. Although that's important to us, but if the boat's under warranty, customer's out using it and it fails, he's got to take it back to the dealer, so he's inconvenienced. But the dealer has to work on it, has hours of diagnosis, hours of repair, sends us the bill. Can literally wipe out the profit on a boat in just really a day or 2 of trying to assess and repair the issues you might have. Or worse, if the dealer can't repair it, now we're loading it up on a truck, we're shipping it back across the country to our factory for us to work on. So as you can see, those costs would add up pretty quickly. Loss of accreditation. As I talked about, there are 3 ruling agencies, and we'll go through those in a little more detail, but they control our compliance standards. And if we have failures significant enough, we can lose that accreditation, which is something we want to obviously avoid. Number 3 is dissatisfied customer. Now, in the scenario that I described, that customer, that small boat, was extremely dissatisfied, he and his family. And that has an impact to that manufacturer that was not one of our boats. But probably worse than that, and what does impact us, is that that customer is probably not likely to enjoy using his boat anymore. Certainly his family, he'd be hard-pressed to get them to get on the boat with him. And so I really believe that the whole industry lost a customer that day, because I think they were dissatisfied with boating in general. And then last, but certainly not least, impacts of noncompliance could be injury or even death. As I described that boat, it had caught fire, that small family, children with life jackets on, of course, but not really able to swim or sustain themselves, and having to be put into the water because the boat was on fire. So you can imagine the risks associated with that. So that's the risk of noncompliance. Number 3, the ruling agencies. Number 1, and probably most important, is the U.S. Coast Guard. Now, most people see the U.S. Coast Guard on TV, dramatic rescues, and they are a heroic group of people. They guard our shores. Everybody realizes that. That's what they do. But what a lot of people don't realize is they set compliance standards for the industry. And then it's the industry's responsibility to follow those standards to ensure that the boats that are on the water are safe. Number 2 is ABYC, or the American Boating Yacht Council. They are an organization that interprets the federal regulations set by the U.S. Coast Guard, and that we have to follow, and we're a partner with them. And then the NMMA, or the National Marine Manufacturers Association, they are an organization that helps us comply with ABYC and the U.S. Coast Guard regulations through internal auditing. Number 3 on the list is best practice. What I'm going to describe here is a way that we ensure that we are meeting all of the compliance standards set for the industry. And I'll give you an example. If the industry says that wiring should be secured every 18 inches, then our best practice would say that we would go to 9 inches to ensure that at no time could you get into one of our boats and find us not in compliance with the 18-inch rule. So that's the best practice methodology that I'm describing. Number 4, 3 areas of training and certification requirements. We are going to mandate that we comply with 3 areas of certification all the way down to the shop floor level. 1 is wiring and shaft protection. Anybody who touches wiring or installs bulkheads will be certified in that discipline. We're going to have ventilation and installation certifications. Our boats are engines. They emit monoxides and fumes, and that has to be evacuated through our bilge ventilation systems, and that's a pretty critical area for us, so we'll ensure that anybody who installs those systems have their certification. And then last but not least, fuel system installation. Again, probably as critical as wiring, because equally important to not having a system failure due to electrical shortage and potential fire is not to have fuel leaking in your boat. Because you can imagine the combination of a shorting wire and a leaking fuel system, you've got the makings of an explosion. And that's the last thing we'd ever want to have happen in one of our boats. Okay, number 5, next steps. Training will be scheduled for all employees. You'll see a schedule come up with your name on it and when you're going to be trained. Then those exams will be sent to the NMMA, who will grade them and give us each person their certification. And probably last but not least, what we would hope is that when we come back and we're all trained and we're out there on the shop floor, that we apply those standards that we've learned to the shop floor. In conclusion, we talked about noncompliance being associated with high warranty costs, loss of accreditation, customer dissatisfaction, and safety issues. We talked about the ruling agencies, the U.S. Coast Guard, the ABYC, and the NMMA, the organizations that we comply with. We covered 3 areas: focus for future certification, wiring and shaft protection, bilge ventilation systems, and fuel system installations. And at the end of the day, not only do we hope to improve our product overall and improve our standing with our compliance standards, but also just to provide a better, safer product for our customers. So, thank you.